And hello, everybody, and this is Politics by Jake, and we welcome you. Often I don't get this done at the beginning of the show, but I should. And what it is to say, welcome to the show. I know we have literally thousands of new listeners, and that's great. We welcome you to the show. We welcome you to activity. We welcome you to 2026. And 2026, of course, is going to be a very important year because we've got a midterm election. And on this particular weekend, we have another one of and this goes to show you the importance of all this because this is a fight. It's a terrible fight. And I'm go into several aspects of this later. We're going to pick up actually and talk about what we talked about yesterday, which is the illegal overturning or attempt to interfere with elections, which started with Donald Trump in 2020 when he called Fulton County, and he actually called several other places besides Fulton County. Fulton County, Georgia, he called up the Secretary of State there or the appropriate official and asked for 11,000 votes. He says, you need to give me 11,000 votes. And this is the killer thing because the guy he was talking to actually was for him. He voted for him and he said he voted for him. You had the same situation in Arizona where the person said he voted for him, and there's this kind of and I want to use the word psychotic, and I say psychotic because there is a kind of a collective psychosis because when Trump calls these people, they speak as if they don't understand what it is that they're saying. They're saying, I voted for you and I would vote for you again, but there are no 11,000 votes. And by saying, I would vote for you again, you're acknowledging that you're talking to a person right at that moment who is trying to get you to engage in a conspiracy to interfere after the fact in an election and throw the election to the person who you said you voted for once and you would vote for again. This and I feel constrained. I'm sorry. I'm getting not sidetracked because it's all important, but I'm feeling constrained to point this out again. This is what I talk about all the time. This is what I call the Jungian thing. And when I say the Jungian thing, of course, I am speaking of Carl Jung, 1875, born in 1875, Swiss psychiatrist, very influenced by Freud's book, The Interpretation of Dreams, but a psychiatrist in his own right and said some very important things. And one of the things he talked about, and I talked about it yesterday, and we're going to do it again because one of the key issues I'm going to be talking about on the show today is a continuation of what happened yesterday, is what happened in Riverside County, which is why we're talking about Fulton County, which is why we're talking about 2020 and 2021, the early part of it, when Trump had lost the election, but he didn't believe that he had lost. And this is the whole idea behind what we've been talking about because it's happening again in Riverside County. I'm getting ahead of myself, but it happened again in Riverside County, and I'm hailing back to give you context so that you understand just exactly where this comes from. So you have Trump calling the Secretary of State, as I said, in Fulton County, Georgia, who voted for him, who said he voted for him, said he would vote for him again, but in the midst of these accolades and what he feels are these express supports because he said, "Hey, if there was anything I could do for you, I would do it for you." But the fact of the matter is, there are no 11,000 votes. You lost the election in Fulton County. At least you lost the election. Sorry about that, but I'd vote for you again. And you're talking to the man, as I said, who's calling you at the time, asking you basically to throw an election in his favor. But you'd vote for him again. And you hear this all the time, and Jung described this as a collective psychosis. And he talked about the idea of the wounded leader, the person who, and as I say periodically when I say this, What is the one thing that Trump says all the time? It's so unfair. I've been treated so unfairly. And Trump, this son of a money grubbing, penny pinching, nickel nursing Queen's landlord, because that's who he is and that's where he comes from. Very rich and yet feels like he's treated unfairly. Extraordinary. Just extraordinary. But what Jung said, that you have basically a wounded leader. He feels like he's been treated unfairly. Litany of sorrow, that he's been treated unfairly. And he connects with people inexplicably, but this is what Jung said. He connects with people who feel as if they have also been treated unfairly. And there's a symbiotic bond, this strange metaphysical bond that occurs between them, where they have given up, and this is a slightly different thing, but where they give up their own ideals and they start living vicariously through the wounded leader, because they have been passed over in life. They've been treated unfairly. Maybe mommy and daddy didn't love them the way they thought that they should. Maybe they didn't get that job, so on and so forth. Any of a number of things. Maybe they didn't make the football team. It could be anything. But they now have lost their chance. They feel like they've lost their chance, or it's insurmountable for them to be able to go ahead and do what it is that they originally hoped that they would do in life, and which thereby and therefore they feel wounded. So they begin to live vicariously through this wounded leader. And it creates a kind of a collective psychosis where the reasoning of these people becomes short-circuited. And you begin to hear the kind of reasoning on display that I just basically talked to you about, with this just insane phone conversations that Trump had with these various election officials. And I say Secretary of State, but it could be, if you're talking to a county, you're not necessarily talking to the Secretary of State. You're talking to some local election official, some county level election official there. And you have them saying, oh, we voted for you, I love you, I think you're great, but you didn't win. But at the same time realizing, and I'd vote for you again. This is the capper. I would vote for you again. And yet not realizing, because this is part of the Jungian thing, the collective psychosis that Jung talked about, that you don't recognize the enormity of what you're doing, that you're being engaged by a criminal. And I mean, he is a criminal. He's a 34-time felon. He's been found liable and culpable for sexual abuse in a kind of a thing where the judge was actually interviewed in that particular case and was asked about this, if the judge could clarify what the charge was. And I'm, of course, I'm not giving you a blow-by-blow, word-for-word transcript of what was said, but the judge basically told the reporter that if a jury was involved in this, they would understand the allegations that Trump was found culpable and liable for, because it's a different idea in civil court. In civil court, you have a preponderance of the evidence, which is basically 51%. If you've got 51% that says you did something, 49% says that you didn't do something, that 51 cents is what is termed in law a preponderance of the evidence. And you are found culpable or liable. You're not found guilty, because the main damages that occur in civil court are money damages. And so they use different terminology. You're found culpable and liable, but culpable and liable is kind of synonymous with guilty. But it's a difference in the kind of a flavor. In criminal court, it's beyond a shadow of a doubt. That is the evidentiary standard, beyond the shadow of a doubt. But the judge said that he was found culpable and liable for sexual assault. And when asked, the judge said, well, if this was a jury, they would consider this, that they were looking at a case of rape. So, okay. I mean, he's a 34-time felon. He's basically a rapist. Sorry. That's what he is. And so you have this collective psychosis of people going along with this, and it short circuits the reasoning process by which hopefully, and I speak more hopefully than in reality, actually, because most people engage in. Socrates said that there are basically three forms of human endeavor, mental endeavor. The first was opinions, and you know about opinions. They're like elbows, everybody has at least two. And there's actually another saying to that, but I won't say that on the air. Although I could, but I won't. I will demur and I will refrain and I will defer and I will say it in a more elegant tone. So opinions are like elbows. Everybody has at least two. And then logic, and logic is the province of the great uh, Star Trek character of Mr. Spock, who thinks logically, and logic is the second one, and reasoning is the third, and it's considered to be the most high. And you can see, if you have been listening to what I've been saying, that reason departs in these situations, and reality departs with it. Hence this collective psychosis, and the main primary symptom is a departure from reality. That's what a psychotic break is. It's where reality ceases to be, and then some alternative paradigm comes to pass, and the person is governed by that alternative paradigm. So, I mean, this is pretty serious stuff. And at this point, let's take a break. This having said, and we will continue with Politics by Jake in a moment after a couple of messages. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. Okay, and we're back. And I just wanted to share something with you this weekend and make you aware. You know, there have been these demonstrations, and you can go to their website. It's called No Kings. And this is now the No Kings demonstration. There is actually a demonstrations going on this weekend. And I believe they went on yesterday, but there may be some going on today. I would suggest that if you can, you participate in one of these. Go on public transportation, wherever you can do, and go to a demonstration. This is the No Kings demonstration, and I believe that this is the third one. There was one in the spring of last year. There's one in June, then one, I believe, in October, and one in January. The culminating point was about 7 million. So I hope we could get at least to 10 to 12 million Americans turning out on this. Find a demonstration if you can. This may be belated. A lot of it's happening on Saturday. There are more than 3,000 in the country. And the reason I bring this up, after talking about what the prefatory note to what really is the topic of the show, which is the election problem in Riverside County, because of these things, that there's this great desire to protest against Trump, and mainly the themes, of course, will be the obvious one. on domestic economics, inflation, decline in real wages, which the war in Iran has not helped, by the way. That's created a terrible problem, which I talked about briefly when I talked about fallout and the $32 cup of coffee and a donut. Increased cost of living, indifference of Trump to all that. He thinks it's a lot of garbage. All of these things that I just described, because Donald Trump is, quite honestly, he's a mentally ill person. He's a greatly troubled person. And I feel comfortable saying that because so many mental health professionals affirm that this is the case. So this being the case, board certified psychiatrists, board certified psychologists, who many of whom say it, his own niece Mary, also a board certified psychologist, also says that. So I think I'm on safe ground making that statement. And one of the things with Donald Trump is you're all just characters, and you are. And the MAGAs are, and the evangelical Christians, and all of these other people who support him and who are his base, and some of the ones who infest Congress now. Um, he thinks you're all just characters in his play. And he thinks all your concerns are a bunch of garbage. Um, you know, uh, Inflation, domestic economics, decline in real wages, increase of cost of living. He thinks it's nonsense, and he's so detached. And I go back to the F. Scott Fitzgerald Great Gatsby, where the character says the rich really are different than us. And to which Ernest Hemingway laughingly opined, yeah, they have more money. And yeah, that's right. They have more money, but this makes them comparatively immune and detached from the issues, the real issues in life. And I believe that this is what Fitzgerald was trying to convey when he talked about this. Um, Domestic economics, inflation, uh, real wages, a living wage, an increase in the cost of living, which makes it harder for the wage that you get to cover the things that you need. And this is Trump. Trump is this way. We have an oligarch class, we have a moneyed class, which is very much the same way. And if you talk to Trump about this stuff, you'll say nobody cares about housing. Well, I beg your pardon. Everybody cares about housing, of course, unless you've got so many houses that you've lost count. That's very few of us these days. I know I'm not in that. But so there's your domestic framework. Um, but what's missing generally in dimensions like this, of course, is the international dimension. I think that there is a danger that the anti-Trump protest movement is going to lose some momentum and lose some support. How much I can't say, uh, but the idea is that you cannot seriously go before American voters. Don't try to tell us that Iran is a benign and innocuous power. Don't try to argue that there was a deal on the table as a result of, I think, rather unfortunate, and this troubles me as well, the opposition party, the Democratic Party, opportunistic uh, party politicians trying to say there was a deal. How do we know? Well, Oman told us. Well, Oman is a country. It's the weakest one of the Gulf Arab states. The Gulf Cooperation Council. Oman is a place where they try to make a business of mediating. They feel that they're the weakest and they don't want to be involved. Of course, now they are involved. Anyway, we'll talk about this, and I want to talk about this some more, but I want to get back to what it was that we were talking about. Um, I talked to you about Fulton County. And thus having done, I want to talk to you more. Yesterday, we started the show, yesterday, 28th, with a simple question. What happens when people stop believing the outcome and start believing that the outcome must be impossible, couldn't possibly have happened? And I opined that once you cross that line, the law doesn't matter anymore. If you get to a point where you're thinking along those terms, the law doesn't matter. And we walk through a real world example, Riverside County. A sheriff, Chad Bianco, I call him Commander Buzzcut, real, kind of caricature, kind of almost a cartoonish looking type character. Sheriff taking possession of more than 650,000 ballots. Not through recounts, and as I explained, this was the redistricting election where Donald Trump had said that whimsically, maybe not whimsically, but, and this, once again, goes to the collective psychosis. I cannot say this enough because it's one of the only ways, there are a couple of ways that I can explain to you, but this is one of the only ways that you can understand why this is allowed to happen, why Donald Trump skates through life. No one seems to stop him, and he can do whatever he wants because no one seems to stop him. And why is that? So, a sheriff taking possession of more than 650 ballots through recounts because Donald Trump wanted to redistrict Texas and say, we need like 5 more seats. I believe he said it was 5. 5 more seats in the state of Texas. We need that. And in this collective psychotic response, the local politicians of the state of Texas and their adherents and their hanger-on and their collaterals, probably in other states, rushed to make this thing that Donald Trump wanted happen. Even though, as I said, redistricting occurs only once every 10 years because it's done proportionately on the House. It's not done in the Senate. Senate gets you get 2 senators in the Senate. That's it. There's nothing to change about that. But in the House, it's proportionate. It's done by proportion. So, in other words, and it's done by the census because the census is taken once every 10 years. And if a particular district has more people and the amount of people they get is equivalent to requiring them to have another representative, they get another representative. And that's the way it's done. And even though it hasn't been 10 years, these people hastened to see if they could do it for Donald Trump and get it done. And they did get it done. And Governor Gavin Newsom, who this Chad Bianco sheriff is running against, basically said, well, we're going to offset that, and held their own redistricting election. And the motion, or rather the resolution to do a redistricting to create more seats in California to offset the 5 seats in Texas passed. It passed large. It was. You will excuse me if I don't give you the exact figures. I think it was something like 7.4 million. I believe that's what it was. 7.4 million voted for, and 4.1 million voted against. And this was inconceivable to some people. How could it have been that California was able to do this? And once again, the collective psychosis, because you ask the question, how could California have done this when Texas already did it? So why should it be so strange that what happened in Texas could happen in California? And that the people in California could vote for redistricting because the people in Texas voted for redistricting. This is the collective psychosis. This is the detachment from reality. And I explained how elections are very controlled things. And there are many, like recounts, audits of ballots that occur. You don't need a renegade sheriff who actually is running against Gavin Newsom for governor. Gee, I wonder if that had anything to do with it. You don't need a sheriff going to, and this is another thing I don't understand, but I mean, I'm going to say it again. When you go and do, this is a radical thing. This is an anti-constitutional thing. To take control of state election. And it was done under the auspices of a fraud investigation. And I I hasten to restate these things and not take up so much of our time talking about them. But for those of you who didn't listen yesterday, this is what it was. And Bianco would have, of necessity, had to go to the county attorney and say, hey, do I have anything here on this fraud investigation? And this is the thinnest of pretexts. And it's not really something that the county sheriff should have been involving themselves in. But anyway, it was. And one has to wonder about the county attorney. It's Riverside County. One has to wonder about the county attorney who would say, yeah, sure, go ahead. Sure, fraud, right. And I hope you can hear the laconicness and the cynicalness in my voice. So, the state authority said, state officials say, a fraud investigation, it has no credible basis. When you're doing a criminal investigation, you have to have probable cause. And if there's no credible basis, you don't have any probable cause. And we made a distinction in that case that matters here. And that is the distinction between the appearance of process and the substance of process. Because once you have the appearance without the substance, something has already shifted. And we got to a very important point. There are rules. There are defined ways to challenge outcomes. There are structures that exist so that disputes don't turn into power struggles. And then we said, you don't just wake up one day and decide you're going to take possession of hundreds of thousands of ballots of an electorate. That's not how it works. Except now, in some places, like Fulton County and Riverside County, it is. And that's where we're going to pick up today. And at this point, let's take a break. This is Politics by Jake. We will be back after a few commercials, and we will talk some more about this. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. All right, and we're back. Now, the real issue is not the act itself. Believe it or not. You may say, wait a minute. $650,000 ballot, 650,000 voter ballots seized outside ordinary procedure on the thin pretext of a fraud investigation that was probably made up by the county attorney because he was either too afraid or he got his bar license out of a Cracker Jacks box to where he was going to assent to allow this Riverside County sheriff, who is running for governor against Gavin Newsom, and you've got to suspect something right there as far as the logic behind him doing. He wants to get attention for election so he can position himself in a certain way. It's just incredibly cynical. This is Commander Buzzcut, Chad Bianco. But The real issue, and I talked about this a little earlier in the show, is the logic behind the act. That's a real issue. The issue of the 650,000 ballots being seized, that's an issue too. But a bigger issue, a kind of a sine qua non, without which not, if you don't understand this, you can't understand it, is the logic. And I say again, as I said earlier in the show, what has to happen internally for someone to say, this is justified? We can do this. We can go outside ordinary procedure. Forget audits, forget recounts, forget the fact that states control elections, not counties. What? Where does that come from? Because once you understand that, it's easy. It doesn't make it any more legal, but it makes it easier to understand everything that follows after that. And it starts with belief, not evidence, but belief. If you're convinced that your side represents the majority, then losing doesn't register as a legitimate outcome. It registers as an error. So in other words, all the recounts, all the audits, when authorized, there are procedures that are followed. You don't just get to do an automatic recount. You don't just get to do an automatic audit, but there are these procedures. But it starts with belief. If you're convinced that your side represents the majority, then voting doesn't register as a legitimate outcome. It registers as an error, and not just an error, but an error that must be corrected. And it's one small step to question the legitimacy of the election itself and the fidelity and legitimacy of the election officials. So once you get to that point, you're no longer asking, what does the process say? The process of the results of the election. You're asking, how do I fix this? Never mind what the process says. How do I fix this? Because a priori, before everything, this has to be wrong. It's not possible that 7.4 million people, follow me here, okay? 7.4 million people in California could vote for redistricting as opposed to 4.1 million in the state, in the county of Riverside. And it's not possible because the situation in Texas where Donald Trump said, we need 5 more Texas congressmen, and Texas did the very same thing, and that's reasonable, but this isn't, and this therefore is not possible, and that this therefore must be error. Now, you say that to me, I say, come on, get out of town, will you? But to the people who are continually propagandized by Fox News, by One America News Network, by Newsmax, owned by billionaires, owned by family concerns, not publicly owned. Newsmax is publicly owned, but the majority percentage is owned by a private interest, by a private family. So you're looking at this, and I'm sitting here, and I'm looking at this, at your reasoning, and I'm saying, get out of here. Get out of here. You can't be serious. Don't you understand what it is that you're saying? Don't you understand that what you said makes no sense whatsoever? But that's not the way they think. And this is my whole point. It's a complete shift in orientation, isn't it? It doesn't matter that Donald Trump did it first. It doesn't matter that his acolytes and his followers did it, even though it wasn't supposed to be done. and they did it anyway, and they got their 5 additional Congress seats. Gavin Newsom did it, and it must be illegal. But Donald Trump, not illegal. Gavin Newsom, illegal. And, you know, I'm being a little forthright. I admit I'm raising my voice a little bit because I want you to get this. I want you to understand how wacky, how completely wacky is. Process is about constraint, okay? Process says this. This is how you proceed. These are the limits. These are the rules. But fixing something you believe is wrong, that's about the outcome. That's not about the process. You're not honoring the process. Just like the logic, and it is no logic, but let me say I use the word loosely. Just like the logic that Texas used and California looked at, those who are of the 4.1 million who said, it cannot be that this county redistricting petition passed. Impossible. How can that be possible? It's the disparity there, you see. That's what I'm trying to point out. That says the process works all the time, but now it doesn't work. There's something wrong. Even though Donald Trump already did it, and it was illegal when he did it, it was illegal when the state of Texas did it, or you can say at the very, because I don't have ultimate facts that it was illegal, but it was outside ordinary procedure. You don't do redistricting unless you have a census that indicates that you have a different and proportionate population. You don't. That's what it's about. That's what redistricting is about. And I'm saying, loosely speaking, it's illegal. It's certainly outside ordinary procedure. But to say it's okay in one case and to say it's not okay in another case, it's just, it's crazy. And when the outcome becomes the priority, the process, all these things that I just said, those things become an obstacle. Don't confuse us with the facts. Instead, it becomes something to get around. It becomes something to bypass, because how could this possibly be true? Something to override. And once you start thinking that way, you don't see what you're doing as breaking the rules. You see it as enforcing what the rules were supposed to produce in your mind. Not in the mind of the mass of the electorate, but in your mind, what the rules were supposed to produce in the first place. That's the psychological term. I'm not violating the system. I'm correcting it. According to who? You see? And that's where it gets dangerous. Because once you do that, and remember, we have Donald Trump, the anti-Constitution president, the against America president, who did it first. So they look at it and they say, well, I'm Chad Bianco. I'm Commander Buzzcut. I'm the sheriff of Riverside. 8 stars on my lapels. 8 stars! Starched shirt. My uniform can stand up even if I'm not in it. I just jump on a trampoline and jump in through the neck, and I'm in it. Okay, little humor there. If Donald Trump did it, maybe I, who am the sheriff of Riverside County, and who am running for governor against the evil Gavin Newsom, num, 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 num. Maybe I can do it too. See, that's how it is. Because now, anything can be justified. Taking possession of ballots, bypassing procedures, asserting authority, Chad, Commander Buscott, asserting authority that doesn't exactly or actually exist within the framework that you're interfering. Yes, the framework that you're interfering with. Well, Donald Trump did it, so it must be right. Do you see? Do you see the disconnect? Do you see the psychotic? Do you see the break with reality? This is important. I've talked about this periodically. This isn't the first time. If you just happen to be listening to the show for the first time, you think, oh, he's talking about this Carl Jung thing. I talk about this all the time, and I talk about it because it's a break with reality. And as I said in an earlier segment, the primary exemplar of psychosis is a break with reality. That's why Jung called it a collective psychosis. But under these circumstances, taking possession of ballots, anything can be justified. Bypassing procedures, that's just totally okay. You can do that. Asserting authority that doesn't exactly exist within the framework, it becomes acceptable because the outcome is presumed to be wrong. Now step back from that for a second, okay? Because this is not just about one sheriff. This is not just about one county. This is a way of thinking. And once that way of thinking takes hold, it spreads. Why? Because it's persuasive. It feels right. It aligns with what people already believe. It's like the great cowboy movie. I think it was a Clint Eastwood movie where they're going to deputize these criminals. And I mean, the criminals are Mexicans, but never mind about that. It just so happens. And he wants to give them badges. The corrupt sheriff wants to give them badges. And what's the famous retort? Badges? Badges? We don't need no stinking badges. And at this point, let's take a break. This is Politics by Jake, and we will be back. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. All right, and this is Politics by Jake, and we are back. And see, that's when you start to see repetition. And I've pointed out Fulton County, and I think it was Maricopa County in Arizona, not sure. But it also happened in Arizona. It happened in several places in 2020, 2021, when Trump was trying to throw the election, and he was talking to various county and state election officials, trying to get them to give him votes where none existed. Because how could it be that he had lost? See, Fulton County, other investigations, other claims, 60 lawsuits, all of which were dismissed. And this is, in 2020, saying that there was interference in the election. And the judges said, well, counselor, give me a proffer, I mean, explain to me what it is. And they couldn't. And so the judges threw them out. In every single case, they threw them out. So it's a different place and it's the same pattern. And the pattern is this: the outcome is unacceptable. Donald Trump, 2020. 61 lawsuits, 3 strikes, no hits, no nothing. Therefore, the process is insufficient. Therefore, action must be taken outside the process. It starts with him. That's where it comes from. That's the progression. And once that progression becomes normalized, you no longer have a stable system. You have a system that can be overridden whenever somebody believes strongly enough that the outcome is wrong. That's why Chad Bianco, Commander Buzzcut, is doing what he's doing. That's not a system. That's volatility. That's variability. That's departure from procedure. That's departure from norm. That's departure from law. Because now, once you do that, the rules only apply when people agree with the result. And you notice you're not hearing anything about this story except from me. That's because the corporate media is compromised. They're complicit. They're complicit, they're corrupt, they're controlled, and they're corporate. So now the rules only apply when people agree with the result. And when they don't, well, Donald Trump did it, even though it was completely, totally wrong, completely unfounded without any basis whatsoever. But Chad Bianco's going to do it. We, the people of Riverside County who lost because we didn't agree with redistricting, and we lost, they reserve the right to step in. And now, think about what that means, okay, going forward. Not just for elections, but for everything. If belief can override process in one area, it can override it in others. And once that door is open, it doesn't close easily. This is why I'm so concerned, I might add, with the things that Donald Trump is doing. And he's doing many things. Starting in April or May, do you know that his signature is going to be on the $100 bill? Did you know that? That is the province of the Secretary of the Treasury. But Donald Trump thinks he's the government. And everybody else are just bit players. Just bit players. So his signature is going to be on the money. A banner is hanging from the Department of Justice with his face, his stern, pugnacious face on it, hanging right in front of it. This is going on. There are many things going on that we don't hear about. And they're just being winked at. Which is why I say the press is complicit. They are. I'm sorry. They are. They're corporate. They're corrupt. They're controlled. They're complicit. So not just for elections, for anything, for Donald Trump deciding that he wants his name to be on the money. For Donald Trump deciding that he wants to be a king. That's what No Kings is about. Because people see that that's what he wants. Because if belief can override process in one area, it can override it in others. And maybe Donald Trump should be a king. And maybe he should have his name on the money. And maybe his banners should be hanging in front of, this is really true. I'm not kidding you. This is true. Maybe his banners should be hanging in front of all the government buildings. And this is not all. There's many, many more. And then it becomes normal. And then you lose your democracy. And you really do have a situation where you have a king. Once that door is open, it doesn't close easily, because every future action can be justified in the very same way. Oh yeah, we did democracy once, but Donald Trump came along and he's right, and he showed us the way. No, Donald Trump is mentally ill. Donald Trump is a criminal. Donald Trump is a felon many times over. Donald Trump consorts with dictators. And many, many other things that I could say. So the result must be wrong. This outcome is therefore unacceptable. Therefore, the normal rules don't apply. And that's how erosion happens. Not all at once, but through repetition of these very kinds of things, through winking at all of these things that are going on. Yeah, we used to have the Secretary of Treasury's name on the money, but Donald Trump is on the money now, so that must be okay. Through repetition, through justification, through normalization, until eventually the fact that Donald Trump's visage is hanging in a giant banner in front of the Department of Justice, something that used to be unthinkable, it becomes routine. And when that happens, you're no longer operating inside a system governed by law. You're operating inside a system governed by belief, by the belief in the almighty Donald Trump. Do you see? And once you understand that, you can start to see it in other places. Not just in elections, but in policy, in foreign affairs, in the way decisions are justified. And we're at the end of the show now, but maybe I shouldn't have even said that, because then you're going to leave, oh, Jake's not talking anymore, we can go do something else. But listen to this last part, please, because this is where it gets even more serious. Because once belief overrides process internally, you start to see the same kind of structure externally in policy. You see it in foreign affairs, in the way decisions are made without a clearly defined objective. What's everybody complaining about on the Iran war right now? Nobody's saying what it is that we're doing there. The president isn't. And honestly, wars are started for many reasons. Trump is all about money. He's all about grift. He's all about the con. He's all about getting everything that he can get. And those are reasons why he would start a war and not be able to explain why he did it, because he can't. Because the American electorate, if they heard that, even they have limits and they would never put up with. And that's where we have to go next. Because there was a time not that long ago when policy actually had structure. It had defined interests. It had defined boundaries. It had defined responses. And there's a name for that when you have that. It's called a doctrine. And this is Politics by Jay. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. If you think owning things in your own name keeps you in control, think again. In today's world, lawsuits, taxes, and predators are everywhere. That's why the smart money hides in plain sight. We help you to build legal firewalls, LLCs, land trusts, private contracts that protect your assets while keeping you invisible. Call Twain Consulting today at 310-997-2204. Find us on Facebook at Twain Consulting. That's facebook.com/Twain Consulting. Protect what you've built before someone else takes it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake.